the floor to Trey McGowan. He'll lob it for his...
On 90.3 KRNU, it's Huskers Hoops Live.
You betcha! Jazz Shelley has a triple-double!
Now, here's your host, Jacob Schwantz.
You hear the very hyped-up call from Matt Coatney in the intro. Welcome into Huskers Hoops Live. That call was from a couple of years ago when Jazz Shelley put together a triple-double, but what a performance she had this weekend against the Iowa Hawkeyes to really lead Nebraska to a potentially season-changing, resume-building upset win over the number 2 Hawkeyes in Lincoln. What a game that was. We'll be breaking it down a little bit later on in the show, but welcome in to Huskers Hoops Live, 15th episode of this season, and we got a lot to talk about. We got 2 men's basketball games from this past week, 2 very different performances from this Husker basketball team, continuing to really play into this narrative that it's 2 different teams this season. It's the road team and it's the home team, and for Nebraska, unfortunately, they haven't been able to kind of throw those narratives to the side and just be even-keeled and play basketball the same way on any given day. But it's resulted in a very impressive home record, not very impressive road record, and that's kind of what's keeping Nebraska in a little bit of this bubble in the Big Ten. However, some of these games coming up might be in favor of a little bit of a Nebraska run in the late season. But let's get into some of the news from this past week, because the biggest news was Nebraska beating Iowa. That was their the win over their highest-ranked opponent in program history. It's tied with number 2 Baylor being defeated 103-99 in triple overtime back in 2005. They were talking a lot about that on the radio broadcast, but how this game almost felt as big, if not bigger, just because it's a rival matchup with Iowa, and Caitlin Clark was going for the scoring record. And to be able to come through and take them down in the way that they did, I thought was super impressive. It was the first win over Iowa since December 28th of 2019. They hadn't beat the Iowa Hawkeyes since Caitlin Clark has come to the Iowa campus. And it also snaps a 9-game losing streak to Iowa. So there are a lot of significant nuggets in there in this, college rivalry matchup between Nebraska and Iowa. And they played well in the first matchup in the season on the road, but that game kind of just got away from them. I thought they showed a lot of really great resolve in this matchup at home. But like I said a minute ago, we'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. I want to start with the 2 men's basketball games and just kind of give my thoughts on what we saw. So we'll start with the Northwestern game. The Huskers lose that one 80-68 on the road. Showed some good fight late, but just some early runs given up to the Wildcats kind of put this one out of contention for Nebraska at a certain point. Boo Buie, he pretty much handed it to Nebraska after really struggling in the matchup earlier on in the season. He was 6 of 13 from the field, 22 points, 4 assists, 2 steals. Just a very effective game from the college basketball veteran Boo Buie. He's such an important guard for what Northwestern does, and it was a big-time response in this game because they really needed him to be pretty good, because Nebraska was coming off a very close game against Illinois. There was hope that maybe that would kind of shake some of these road woes for Nebraska this season. That did not end up being the case. There was maybe a thought that Keisei Tominaga was going to start this February run like he did last season, where he starts to become one of the highest scorers in the conference per game to finish the season, because he was coming off, I believe it was 31 points on the road in that loss in overtime to the Illini. But he had a little bit more of a quiet day in that one against Northwestern. And Boo Buie really let Nebraska know how much he was frustrated with that first performance, because him and a couple of the other guys were doing the celebration that Keisei Tominaga has started to do this season. He kind of started that little face that he does in that kind of a dagger shot against Northwestern around a month or so ago. And it seems like they really took it to heart, because not only was Boo Buie doing it, but I remember Ty Berry did it a couple times. So it seemed like this game really meant a lot to Northwestern, I would say, because they were at home, and Nebraska is actually, believe it or not, a very quality win for all these Big Ten teams at this point this season. So they're trying to take down Nebraska as much as possible, and to be able to get that win back from earlier on in the season is going to be huge for Northwestern's resume, because you don't want to get swept by a team in a season series. Nebraska got the first one against Michigan this past weekend, and they have to finish the year on the road at Michigan. I'm sure that's going to be a very similar atmosphere to what we saw in this Northwestern game on the road, where, you know, a team is just doing all they can to not be swept in a season series. And Michigan, yeah, their postseason hopes might be done at this point, but they're going to be playing hard in their home arena to take down Nebraska as well. So hopefully the Huskers can figure out a way to get some of these road troubles under control. I thought they did a good job against Ty Berry in this one. Only 6 points on 7 shots. He was someone that really goes off for Northwestern, it seems like, anytime they play Nebraska. But the Huskers did give up 15 points to Nick Martinelli off the bench, along with 3 other double-figure scorers in this game. And for the Nebraska side of things, 15 points from Juwan Gary. Not too bad. The Huskers, they did make a change in the starting lineup for this one. They went to kind of a bigger, maybe a little bit more defensive and rebounding-focused starting lineup. It was Juwan Gary, Bryce Williams, Keisei Rinkmast, and Josiah Alec. It didn't end up really working too much in this game because Northwestern was performing really well offensively, and you didn't really see any dominant rebounding numbers. You didn't see any just swarming defense that Northwestern wasn't able to overcome. I would say it was not a successful change. If people don't know, the only change in the starting lineup was the insert of Juwan Gary for a replacement of Jamarcus Lawrence at the 1. They ended up having Bryce Williams run most of kind of those point guard duties in that starting lineup. Lawrence, he stayed aggressive, though. I think it's such an interesting experiment this season with Jamarcus Lawrence, because there was hope with the way he finished 2023 that he would take a step forward. And I think his aggressiveness has been something that hasn't wavered, and his confidence in his shot hasn't wavered late in the season. But his effectiveness and efficiency has really fallen off from last season when that hope was being built, when those final few games in, later February, early March, and we're starting to approach that time of the year again. So maybe Jamarcus Lawrence will find something in himself that he had last year at around this exact point in the season when he took home that Freshman of the Week to finish the 2023 season. Keisei Tominaga, he followed up that 31 from the Illinois game with 11 points on 7 shots. And, it's easy to say they need to get Keisei more involved, but I mean, if you really watch the games, the defense that these teams are playing against Keisei, I mean, he's being face guarded pretty much past half court. It's the number one priority on the off-ball defense to make sure that Keisei does not get loose for an open shot, whether it's from 3, mid-range, little floater in the lane. They are on him as much as possible. So, yeah, 7 shots, you might want to see Keisei up at maybe 12 or 13 on a good night, but you don't want him just chucking up shots just for the heck of it because he needs to get shots. That's something that Caitlin Clark has had success doing because she is so talented and so much better, really, than everyone else out in the court, that Iowa kind of needs her to do that at times in some of their bigger matchups. But Nebraska's a little bit more team-oriented offensively. They can share the ball and win by committee. So you don't want to see K-State just launching shots for no reason. Some people might see some of his shots as ones that are for no reason or just him throwing something up. But a lot of times you kind of have to live with it when he does that because of the way that he can score from such long range. And when you're being face guarded in this way, sometimes the only way to get a shot off is to take a contested one. And I think he's actually been pretty good at taking those contested shots and making them in this season. But when K-State doesn't go off, you really see a big difference in the offense. One of the only games that Nebraska's looked elite offensively when K-State is not playing that well is the Ohio State game at home when he couldn't really, or was it Ohio? I think it was Ohio State because that was the rink masked game where he had 6 threes. Even the Wisconsin game, he didn't do that much. He played a little bit, mostly was on the bench in the kind of crunch time minutes, and it was kind of led by Sam Hoiberg and Bryce Williams in the backcourt and C.J. Wilcher as well. So it's been somewhat of a rarity when Nebraska plays well and K-State doesn't in terms of, scoring the basketball is what I'm trying to say. Another big reason for this loss, though, for Nebraska was the bigs, 2 for 10 combined. Rink Mass, 2 of 8 from the field. He did hit 2 threes, but those were his only made shots in this ball game. Not a great performance up front for the Huskers. I thought this was an area that they could maybe have the advantage. Nicholson for Northwestern, that's kind of their 5-man. He's a big guy, but I feel like Rink Mast, with how great he's been this season, that should have been a matchup that Nebraska could win. And unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. The 2 for 8 from the field, nothing special, especially for his standard. I mean, we've seen Rink Mast hit so many tough shots, so many clutch shots. He's been an elite rebounder at times for Nebraska, been a big reason why this team has been one of the better rebounding teams in the entire Big Ten Conference. I want to actually take a look at that real quick because earlier on in the season, Nebraska was kind of leading the way in rebounds, and now they're still in 4th place in the Big Ten after the Michigan game in team rebounding. So that's pretty good numbers for a Nebraska team that has been one of the bottom tier rebounders in the Big Ten for the last few years. And a lot of that has had to do with Rink Mast. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough against Northwestern in this performance to really pull this one off from Rink. I'm looking now. He had 6 rebounds. Huskers were led by Bryce Williams, who had 10 rebounds in a double-double performance with 13 points. But you'd like to see Rink get a little bit more active on the glass. And something else that bothered me was seeing C.J. Wilcher, just not the same guy that we've seen in the month of January and some of early February as well. Just 2 of 7 from the field in over 20 minutes of play against Northwestern. He was 1 of 6 against Illinois the game prior, so you combine those numbers, he's 3 of 13 in those last 2 road games. And it's really unfortunate because C.J. Wilcher has been so elite shooting the basketball this season. He was up over 40% from 3, and maybe he's coming down a little bit more to earth, closer to the average in college basketball, but even that, at this point, that's dropped a little bit. It's still a fantastic shooting season from C.J. Wilcher and a big step back toward what he was in his first year with Nebraska. And, it's sad to see that he's falling off just a little bit at the end of the season, but, you have to think eventually with maybe some of these lesser competition games, maybe CJ finds it again, and all of a sudden, Nebraska's up at that top-tier shooting as a team once again. Last note on the Northwestern game, though, 17-10 turnover margin in favor of the Wildcats. The Huskers, these turnovers are a big problem. You've got 7 Huskers with more than 1 turnover in this game. It's just not going to get the job done on the road when you've got all those turnovers. You're not rebounding super well, and Northwestern is hitting shots in front of a very live crowd in Evanston. So kind of disappointing that the Huskers couldn't bring that momentum from the Illinois performance. Even though it was a loss, they couldn't bring that energy and that fight enough to pick up a win against Northwestern. Would have been a great season sweep of a team that has a lot of cachet in the Big Ten as of late. Recent tournament appearances could have been great for Nebraska to pick up both wins, but getting that one at home is still going to be very impressive, especially with the way that Northwestern is finishing this season. That win at home is going to mean even more. Similar to what we saw against Michigan State earlier on in the season, that win didn't seem like it would mean as much just because of how difficult the Spartans' earlier season schedule was. They were around a 500 team after that loss to Nebraska, but at this point in the year, they're one of the better Big Ten teams, and when the committee and the selection committee is looking at that win over Michigan State, they're going to say, hey, that's a quality win. And hopefully the win over Northwestern at home from earlier on in the season is going to mean almost as much, if not more, than that Michigan State one. But let's move on to the win of the week for Coach Hoiberg's squad. They took on Michigan this past weekend. They won that one 79-59. Just basically a complete flip-flop from what we saw on the road against Northwestern in the midweek matchup. Big shout-out to Josiah Alec in this one. He had a season-high 16 points, season-high 8 rebounds, and it was a great response. He was kind of an absent performance against Northwestern. I got the numbers in front of me. He was 0 of 2 from the field, did not score, he didn't even get a rebound. He had 2 turnovers, 1 block, and that's a day from Josiah Alec. Not ideal, but you look at the complete change in the shift. He played just over 22 minutes, 7 of 10 from the field. He had 8 rebounds with those 16 points, and just almost a completely different player from that game in Evanston to this one in Lincoln this past weekend. And Nebraska needed it because his energy really got things going pretty much from the get-go after that huge dunk, one of the best ones of the season, I would say. I think it was over Kamwa, I want to say, along the baseline. But yeah, he took him right to the rim, jammed it down with 2 hands, and that crowd was going insane. If you remember the student section, that was when the first points of the day went up. Everyone threw the confetti, and that was an epic sight to behold when Josiah just rose up for that dunk. Defensively, though, the Huskers, they brought that same starting lineup, and I think it worked out a lot better, whether it was just because Michigan had an awful shooting day, and I want to get this number correct because it's in front of me here. They shot 32% from the field. Yikes. 9 made shots in the first, 11 in the second. Not great from the Wolverines. What a fall from grace for the Maize and Blue this season. Only 2 players for Michigan shot over 50%. That was Namari Burnett and Will Cheddar. And I think that was, again, because Michigan's shooting overall performance from the field was not great. But Nebraska's defense in this one, I thought, was super active. I think maybe Coach Hoiberg kind of got into them over the past few days just about how they were giving up a little bit too much on the other end, because you think back to the overtime game against Illinois, I think they gave up, what was it, like 80-ish points, I want to say, and then the one against Northwestern in the midweek matchup, they give up 80 in that one. And yeah, Illinois was overtime and Northwestern wasn't, but that's just a little bit too much. You get back to that 59 points allowed. That's not a sustainable number defensively in a conference as tough as the Big Ten. But whenever you can hold a Big Ten opponent to less than 60 points in a game, that is incredibly impressive. Michigan on the season, they are, let's see here, one of the higher scoring offenses in men's basketball in the Big Ten. They were 6th coming in or after this game. They still average 76 a game, even after only putting up 59 against Nebraska. That's a top half Big Ten offensive team in terms of scoring. And Nebraska held them to way under their season average what would that be, by around 16, 17 points. So pretty impressive stuff for this maybe new and improved starting lineup. It's still kind of early to say that just because it's only the second time that Nebraska has brought this starting lineup into these late season conference matchups. And there's multiple shot clock violations that I remember. Most of those were because Michigan was passing the ball looking to find someone, and it was just a hounding defensive effort from Nebraska. You got guys flying to the loose ball. You got guys, swinging over to the corner when someone catches it. They would, not necessarily jump on every pump fake, but if they did, then somebody was there to recover. It was just a great overall defensive performance from the Huskers. They also forced and won the turnover battle 14-9, so kind of a good response there after losing it pretty badly to Northwestern on the road just a few days prior. They only got 12 points off those 14 turnovers, which I thought was a little bit low, but in a game when you win by 20, you can't really complain too much. And the point guard who was in for Doug McDaniel for Michigan, I thought he really struggled. He was not great in this one. Let's get those official numbers for you real quick. This guy Llewellyn, 3 for 12 from the field against Nebraska in that game. And Doug McDaniel was one of the better players for Michigan earlier on this season. He was not available in this game, and so they had to try to find some sort of replacement, and he was not the guy in this game in Lincoln. I mean, it was a very loud crowd. I thought the defense did great on him. I wonder if maybe some of those changes in the starting lineup impacted things at all. But you never know. And something important to mention is the game prior for Michigan, they had upset Wisconsin in a recent game. And Wisconsin is a team that is very good. So Nebraska took Wisconsin and beat them. And then Michigan, who beat Wisconsin, they absolutely dominated Michigan in their most recent game. So they like to joke that if the national championship was played in Lincoln, Nebraska would win it. I don't know if it's really a joke because Nebraska is just a different team when they're playing in Lincoln. The defense was great. They held Kamwa to a 1 of 10 performance from the field. Maybe that size out on defense impacted that as well. It was just a fantastic performance all around. They had a great game from Keisei Tominaga as well. He had some crazy shots. He went on a run, I think it was in the second half. 19 points on 14 shots on the whole day. Only had 2 assists, but fans will remember the kind of bounce pass he had, wrapping around a defender to rink mass for a finish inside. That was one that I remember distinctly off the top of my head. Rink mass, he was quietly near a triple-double as well. He had 8 assists to go with his 6 rebounds and 11 points. And it seemed like Michigan just had nothing for Rink Mast. I mean, you had their center Reed. He was just a little bit too slow reaction-wise. He's a huge dude, but Rink Mast, he was kind of just having his way with him, and they didn't really have anyone off the bench to give some support. CJ Wilcher, pretty quiet day again. Again, really hope he can start to figure something out. He has, if he's maybe got a lingering issue we don't know about, the Huskers luckily have all week. They don't have a midweek matchup. They have until Saturday to host the Nittany Lions. So whoever is either worn down or a little bit exhausted after a tough late season push in terms of games played, maybe some of these guys will be a little bit more fresh. Who knows if that's actually what's happening with CJ or if it's just a little bit of a cold streak. Either way, I think it's going to be good for him. But Jamarcus Lawrence, man, I cannot figure this dude out. 2 for 9 shooting in this one against one of the lower Big Ten teams in terms of standing. I don't know if he'll be able to return to this this standing that I had with him at the end of the year last year. He was so great, and I really hope we'll see another, final few games or so from him that start to turn the season around. I think pretty much everyone I talk about or talk to has kind of lost faith in what Lawrence can do for this team. I still want to hold out hope just because I don't believe that the talent has gone anywhere. We all saw what he did at the end of last year, one of the better offensive options for Nebraska, and I think it's still in there, man. I think he can figure it out. His aggressiveness is still there, and I'm excited to see what happens in his future. But we're going to step aside here on Huskers Hoops Live, and when I come back, we're going to talk some women's basketball in Nebraska, talking the massive upset over the Iowa Hawkeyes right here on 90.3 KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
Make a difference for kids, for people in poverty, for the environment. Join AmeriCorps and get things done right here in Nebraska. With lots of different programs to choose from, you can serve in your area of passion and develop your skills while earning money to pay for college or to repay student loans. All programs are filling AmeriCorps positions to start September 1st. Learn more and apply at serve.nebraska.gov. Sponsored by Serve Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
If you're experiencing anxiety, depression, grief, or are even just homesick, try talking to a friendly professional at CAPS, your university's counseling and psychological service. They offer individual and group services to any registered student at UNL. International students, that means you too. Just call your university health center on city campus anytime Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The services are easy and confidential, and the best part is the first 3 sessions are free. Go online at health.unl.edu/CAPS.
This is Logan.
What's up, everyone?
Logan's been going to UNL for 4 years now.
I know everything that's going on here.
Logan is somewhat informed about campus events.
Like the football game, and I think there's some kind of election, I think.
Don't be like Logan. Pick up a copy of the Daily Nebraskan or follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Not only can you be updated with events on campus, you can read profiles on some of the most interesting people around Lincoln and get unique coverage found nowhere else, because keeping up with the news is one of the most important things a student can do.
What are you still doing with all those old t-shirts that don't even fit anymore? Why not get rid of them by donating them to Goodwill of Lincoln? Goodwill of Lincoln is a not-for-profit organization that takes nearly any household item and item of clothing. Its main mission is willing workers employed and community resources maximized. Goodwill also provides a safe environment for people with mental, physical, and emotional disabilities to be employed. So what are you still doing with those t-shirts? Your freshman 15 is less noticeable in a slightly bigger shirt anyway. Donate the small ones to Goodwill of Lincoln. To contact Goodwill of Lincoln, go to lincolngoodwill.org.
Imagine what it would be like to live in a different country for a month, a couple months, or even a year. You may think,
I don't have money for that.
Or,
it won't fit into my 4-year college plan.
But the Education Abroad office at UNL wants you to know an education abroad is possible for anyone. There are over 400 scholarships to help fund your trip and an advising staff ready to assist with all the planning. So set up your advising session today. Go to educationabroad.unl.edu. The world is waiting for you.
Exaggerating high school athletic achievements to your new college friends. Promising your new college friends that you'd a partial football scholarship to no-name state in Montana. What are these, you ask? These are the symptoms of someone with high school peaker syndrome, or HSPS. HSPS is a serious mental health condition that affects college students post-high school athletics. Thankfully, there is a cure to this crippling disease known as the UNL Men's Rugby Team. UNL Men's Rugby Team offers students the opportunity to relive those glory days. Tackle your HSPS head-on by visiting the rugby team's website at unlrugby.com.
Jake Schrontz back with you on Huskers Hoops Live. Talking some Nebraska women's basketball now. As, wow, what a game. Maybe the best game that I've seen so far at PBA since I've been a student. I was not there in attendance, but just an incredible atmosphere. I heard on the pregame show with Matt Coatney that people were lining up as early as potentially 4 a.m. to get in at PBA. Was general admission for most of the tickets up top. So fans wanted to be there. Caitlin Clark had a chance to set a record for a career scoring in NCAA women's basketball. Ended up being 8 points shy. Didn't score in the fourth quarter. Probably would have gotten the record if she had even an average performance in the fourth quarter for her standards. But she did have 10 assists to get over that 1,000 career assists mark, which was kind of an underplayed storyline, I think, going into this matchup. I mean, everything was about the scoring, but she has been an elite passer of the basketball for years now. And I think that's pretty cool that she got that record as well. Not record, but just career milestone, I guess I should say. But she took 15 threes in this game against Nebraska, hit 5 of them. I guess that's a pretty good number. It's not going to blow you away. 5 of 15, that's only 33%. It's a decent number. But you have to look at some of those misses as well. I mean, she had that 35-footer with less than a minute remaining, front rimmed it, and that was kind of the shot that late in the game, if I was an Iowa fan, I would be frustrated with. Usually you can live with Caitlin Clark kind of just launching these shots, but after Jazz Shelley hits that 3, Nebraska takes their first lead of the ball game. It's going insane in PBA. Everyone's on their feet, and with less than 30 seconds to go, you're down by 1. It's basically 23 seconds on the shot clock and game clock, fourth quarter. So you've got time to set something up, maybe get a shot down low, drive in, draw a foul, get a couple of free throws, either tie the game or take the lead that way. No, Caitlin Clark decides to launch up a shot from way outside. It did not look good coming out of the hands. It was short, and that kind of led Nebraska to the win. I know we'll talk about what got Nebraska to the point where they took the lead. That's really what got them the win. But that miss from Clark early on in the opportunity late in the game, that's kind of a weird way to put it, I realize. In this late opportunity that they had, the final 30 seconds, she takes an early shot in that opportunity when they could have tried to wind it down a little bit more or got a better shot. That leads to fouls against Nebraska, taking free throws, taking a 3-point lead instead of 1, and then Iowa gets a bucket, then they foul again, 2 more free throws, Huskers take another 3-point lead, and then that's it. It's never an easy thing to come back to it from down at least 3 points in less than a minute, because once you have to play the free throw game, you're pretty much just begging your opponent to give you a chance. And I thought Nebraska did a great job when they were put in this position to not give Iowa that chance to come back. But it wasn't just Caitlin Clark in this one against the Huskers. It was Kate Martin as well. She had 20 points, 13 shots. She hit 4 threes, but she did miss that last look. It was a 3-point game. Caitlin Clark got one from way outside, missed it. Somehow the Hawkeyes get the rebound, and it's tipped out to Kate Martin, who has a decent look from the top of the arc and just back iron. I thought that one was going to drop, I have to be honest with you. I thought even after the fight Nebraska put to get themselves the lead, I thought that was going to be a shot that the Hawkeyes get to go their way and we go to overtime, and then you never know what could happen. Caitlin Clark's only 8 points away from the record, and with overtime, with some extra basketball, it could have been a chance for her to get it. And somehow that shot does not fall, even though it looked good out of the hands, and Nebraska pulls off the upset. I think most people couldn't believe it. I think most people did not give Nebraska a shot, and this was a truly shocking win on a Super Bowl Sunday. Husker side of things, though, 23 points from Jazz Shelley in this one. It's just incredibly important that her best game of probably the season, I would say that is her best game of the season, just because of the atmosphere, the importance of picking up a win against not only a ranked opponent, but the number 2 team in the country, coming into your house after you lost pretty big to them earlier on in the season. and she comes out and puts up a 50% from the field, 5 of 10 from 3, 4 of 4 from the free throw line, and 23 points overall, along with 5 assists. Just all around effective, efficient, and pretty much everything Nebraska needed from Jaz Shelley in this ballgame. That's what they got. I really don't think they could have done it without her. Next most important player, though, Alexis Markowski. 15 points, 11 rebounds, finished with 4 fouls, and she was playing with foul trouble pretty much from, I think it was around 30 minutes total left in the ballgame. She was playing with 2 fouls early in the first half, and I thought Coach Williams did a pretty good job of managing her minutes, making sure she didn't pick up another, unnecessary foul. And you have to give some credit to Markowski, too, because it's pretty easy to get frustrated and pick up another foul, especially against this Iowa team that seems to get so many calls. And she did a pretty good job of staying cool, staying calm, and finishing this game out with a great performance. 2 of 2 from three-point range as well. People aren't going to talk about that enough, but hit some important shots from downtown. I thought Natalie Potts did pretty good. 14 points, 6 rebounds, in a probably the most insane atmosphere that she has been a part of. And, I thought she was pretty good. Freshman year, this is going to be a very important win for all of these young players to go forward. But speaking of young players who went off, Logan Nisley, folks, she came off the bench, played almost 24 minutes, 5 of 12 from the field for 15 points, 7 rebounds as well for the young guard, 3 of 7 from downtown, but all 3 of her three-pointers were absolutely crucial. And it ended up not being a season high in scoring, but again, similar to what I said about Jaz Shelley, you consider the opponent and the moment. I would say this is her best game. And she had legitimate moments where she was keeping the Huskers in the game. She had that late 3. She was fouled on that three-pointer by Caitlin Clark. She hit some free throws. And, I mean, you have to just think about how important that a win like this, not only for Logan Nisley and Natalie Potts, but some of these other ones, you've got Jess Petrie as well. I mean, I feel like going forward, if there was any doubt that this team had, even more specifically like the freshmen had in terms of what this team can accomplish, you have to think that is gone, because almost nobody was giving Nebraska a chance against Iowa. I mean, all you have to do is look back at the record recently. They had lost 9 straight to this Hawkeyes team, and they come out and do it. And yeah, it was nearly at the buzzer with Iowa missing a shot to force overtime, but that's a win over the number 2 team in the country and a court-storming, potentially resume-shifting win for this season, but potentially career-shifting win for some of these freshmen and other young players on the Nebraska roster. Happy to see that Jaz Shelley and Alexis Markowski are able to pick up this important win in their career. Shelley hadn't done it. Markowski hadn't done it. And they're kind of some of the only players, I guess you could also look at Maddie Kroll, Kendall Coley, Kendall Moriarty as well, who got the start in this game and played pretty well. 7 points in the starting lineup for Kendall Moriarty. Had a couple of nice cuts. Had an and one as well that stood out. And for them, some of these Nebraska veterans who've been here for a while now, for them to get this win over Iowa, that must have felt good. But then for these youngsters to see what this team can accomplish when they really, come together and play as a unit, I think is going to be huge. Darian White, she kind of came back from a late injury in their last game. Somewhat quiet offensively, but she played some decent minutes defensively off the bench, and I think she kind of just provided all that she could, but she still wasn't officially 100%. Hopefully she will be, because, wow, road does not get easier in the coming up matchup with the Ohio State Buckeyes, this midweek matchup. So you have to think if Darian White could be 100%, that'll help a bit because Ohio State's backcourt is pretty insane, and Nebraska's going to need all the help they can get. But big shout out, Jazz Shelley. She won Big Ten Player of the Week because she was massive in the win over Iowa. Only one game between last week's show and today, but it was probably the most important game of the season thus far for the Huskers. But I'm going to step aside here on Huskers Hoops Live. When I come back, we'll look around the Big Ten, see where Nebraska fits after a very interesting week, and also start to look a little bit at the bracketology because March is coming up quickly, folks, here on KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
Getting involved on campus, meeting new friends, and networking for the future can seem scary, but Scarlet Guard makes it easy for both graduate and undergraduates. Social events help students connect with others around campus, while the professional events help students network with alumni from around the globe. Possibilities within Scarlet Guard are endless, so join today. Go to huskeralum.org/Scarlet Guard or contact the Nebraska Alumni Association. Students today, alumni tomorrow, Huskers forever.
The risk of an American man developing cancer in his lifetime is a little less than 1 in 2. The risk of an American woman developing cancer in her lifetime is a little more than 1 in 3, but the death rates of cancer have been declining in men and women since the early 1990s.
I relay for the support of my sister.
I relay for the support of my grandfather.
I relay for the support of my uncle.
Keep helping those in need by participating in Relay for Life. Join us for Relay for Life at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln each year to fight back against cancer. Sign up for your community event or donate at relayforlife.org.
What are you still doing with all those old t-shirts that don't even fit anymore? Why not get rid of them by donating them to Goodwill of Lincoln? Goodwill of Lincoln is a not-for-profit organization that takes nearly any household item and item of clothing. Its main mission is willing workers employed and community resources maximized. Goodwill also provides a safe environment for people with mental, physical, and emotional disabilities to be employed. So what are you still doing with those t-shirts? Your freshman 15 is less noticeable in a slightly bigger shirt anyway. Donate the small ones to Goodwill of Lincoln. To contact Goodwill of Lincoln, go to lincolngoodwill.org.
The opportunity to grow your own fruits and vegetables the way you like them is right at your fingertips. In neighborhoods just like yours, Community Crops lends various plots of land to families in which they can grow their own food. Join hundreds of families in the Lincoln community as they work this spring planting and harvesting crops in the city's 15 gardens. Start today by registering for the Community Crops Training Program, or to learn more, visit www.communitycrops.org.
Dad, I'm hungry. Why don't we have anything to eat?
Those are words you never want to hear as a parent. But unfortunately, putting food on the table is a constant struggle for many low-income families here in Lincoln, and they don't have the necessary skills to get and maintain a job. They rely on volunteers at the Center for People in Need that can help them through the struggle. You can make a difference in their lives by getting involved in one of the many volunteer programs that the Center for People in Need offers. For more information, please visit centerforpeopleinneed.org.
This is Logan.
What's up, everyone?
Logan's been going to UNL for 4 years now.
I know everything that's going on here.
Logan is somewhat informed about campus events.
Like the football game? And I think there's some kind of election, I think.
Don't be like Logan. Pick up a copy of the Daily Nebraskan or follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Not only can you be updated with events on campus, you can read profiles on some of the most interesting people around Lincoln and get unique coverage found nowhere else, because keeping up with the news is one of the most important things a student can do.
Jake Schron's back with you on Huskers Hoops Live. Taking a look now at some of the standings in the Big Ten and also some of the net rankings in just college basketball, trying to see where Nebraska fits at this point in the season. We're almost halfway through the month of February, and it's important to start looking at these things, especially this year where Nebraska is in a position where they could make it to March Madness in both men's and women's basketball. I think that is a likely outcome. So got to start looking at some of these matchups, where Nebraska might be heading, who Nebraska could be facing at this point. That'll be fun to look at. Starting on the women's side of things in the standings, Ohio State takes the number 1 spot this week after Nebraska upsets Iowa. They are 12-1 in the conference. And Nebraska, with that win over the Hawkeyes, moves up to 4th in the Big Ten standings in conference record. And that's a pretty important move because Ohio State, Iowa, Indiana, top 3. Those are 3 teams that are seen as national title contenders, I would say. 3 teams all with 20 or more wins. Nebraska, the next highest team in the Big Ten. So it's really nice to see them in that same echelon as 3 teams that are really going to be making some moves late into March. In my opinion, I think they're going to go deep into the tournament. But some of the upcoming opponents for this Huskers women's basketball team, you got Ohio State in this midweek matchup. They're number 1, like I just said. And then you got Purdue on the road as well this weekend. They're 3-9 in the conference, 10-13 overall. But Nebraska kind of struggled with Purdue at home. And they were able to finish them out in the end. But it was not an easy matchup, a little bit more difficult than a lot of fans probably expected. So Purdue is not going to be a gimme. Ohio State clearly is not going to be easy. That's going to be one that might be even more difficult than pulling off the upset against Iowa, seeing as it's it's on the road at Ohio State. So definitely some major challenges coming up, but another chance for Nebraska to potentially keep on moving up, higher up in the net rankings. Let's look at where the Huskers are at right now. They're currently in the net 27 spot. And Penn State just ahead of them at 26. So that would have been nice to maybe move up one more spot and switch with Penn State after upsetting Iowa. But at 27 in the net ranking, in how big of a field March Madness is, you're nearly set on being an at-large bid in women's basketball, because you look at some of these teams Nebraska's around. You got Alabama, North Carolina, Texas A&M. Those are all teams below them, and I would imagine all those teams are going to make it. You also got Michigan State at the 23 spot in the net right now. That's another Big Ten team. That's a school that Nebraska beat earlier in the season and is ahead in conference record, but just a little bit less overall. So, you know, maybe Nebraska with a couple of wins could move up in the net even higher, get a higher seed in the bracket this season. And looking at the bracketology right now on ESPN, Nebraska is currently projected as an 8 seed in an 8-9 matchup with Miami. And folks, if they pull off that tough matchup, 8-9 is always so tough to predict. If they can pull off an 8-9 against Miami, they're going to be going up against number 1 seed South Carolina, the top seed overall in the bracket. That's what is being projected at this point in the year. Things can still change with wins and losses, but man, South Carolina might be the favorite this year, and Nebraska is going to run into a buzzsaw in the round of 32 if they can pull off not the upset, but that, 8-9 tough matchup, very evenly matched team with Miami. That would be really fun to watch, and who knows what could happen in March. You never know. So that's kind of where Nebraska stands in the women's side of things. Let's look at men's basketball now, because that's where things get almost a little bit more dicey for Nebraska, because the Big Ten, so competitive this year. Even though they want to only bring 6 teams into March Madness, you have to look at the top and see what these teams are doing, because Purdue, they're 11-2 in the conference, still the number 1 seed in the Big Ten. Illinois right behind them. You've got Northwestern moving up to 3rd after taking down Nebraska. Wisconsin and Michigan State, those are 3 teams right ahead of Nebraska that the Huskers have taken a game against, all of them being in Lincoln. But they're also 2 of those teams, being Wisconsin and Northwestern, being games where Nebraska lost on the road to them. So The Huskers currently sit at the 6th spot in the Big Ten. That's why things are so dicey, because the committee might be only sending 6 Big Ten teams to March. And if you're that 6th team, it's going to be very close if you want to make it into March Madness. The Huskers are currently in the net ranking at 53. That's where they were last week. So you lose to Northwestern, beat Michigan. You don't really move too much. Northwestern's probably frustrated that they're at 55 after beating Nebraska. They would have liked to move up a little bit, especially with the winning streak they are on right now. But, man, in a field of 64, to be that 53rd team in the net ranking is scary at this point in the season, because any late season losses can change that in a hurry. Currently in the bracketology, Nebraska is seen as a 10 seed, and they might be heading to Omaha against Colorado State. That's what ESPN is projecting. So that would be kind of cool to see Nebraska play in Omaha. You have to think, yeah, that's a neutral site game, but I don't know if there will be more fans for any other program in an Omaha arena than the Huskers if they somehow get placed at the CHI Health Center. But if they take down Colorado State, which is who they're projected to play right now, they would move on to either Kansas or Green Bay. And folks, Kansas is a true team. They've got Hunter Dickinson, they've got McCullough, and also Johnny Furphy, the freshman who has been playing pretty well for them as of late. And so they're an experienced team that's going to really give Nebraska a challenge. I don't know if they could pull off that upset. But again, if it's in Omaha, you never know. Kansas fans travel, but Nebraska fans, for their first tournament appearance in a long time, I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere wherever they go, whether they're in Brooklyn, Salt Lake City, Memphis, just naming off some of the cities here, Charlotte as well. Nebraska fans are going to travel, and it's going to be fun to watch. But that's going to do it for kind of that segment where we look at where Nebraska fits in. Let's look now at some of these upcoming games for the Huskers, because it's a very interesting week. The Huskers men's basketball team, they've got Penn State this Saturday. They are 12-12 on the year. They play Michigan State tomorrow. That's probably going to be a loss, I would say. Michigan State playing very well at this point in the season in 2024. Penn State, kind of a middle-of-the-pack offensive team. They score 76 a game, but they're one of the bottom Big Ten teams in three-point percentage. I think that's going to be the key in this weekend's matchup for Nebraska. We just saw the way they were able to shut down Michigan's shooting, and Michigan was a better offensive team than even Penn State is this year. So I really think this is a good chance for Nebraska, who's going to be more fresh than usual, no midweek matchup this week, to come out in front of their home crowd, pick up win number 16 at home to extend this best home record in the entire nation and continue to build this resume into March. They've got only one matchup this week, and then things pick up again next week that we'll talk about. So let's move on to women's basketball as we wrap things up here on Huskers Hoops Live. Ohio State tomorrow on the road. Everyone's eyes should be locked on that matchup, because that's another one where Nebraska could somehow, after the new rankings came out this week, could go back-to-back games with upsets over the number 2 team in the country. Not sure if it's going to happen. It's on the road at Ohio State. The Buckeyes are so good this year. Their only losses have came to USC with Juju Watkins, who I think is the best player in women's college basketball, UCLA, and Michigan on the road. So they're going to be an incredibly tough team. They haven't lost in the year of 2024 yet. They recently beat Michigan State 86-71. Michigan State, folks, that's a very good women's basketball team, and they destroy them by 15. Celeste Taylor went for 20. Rebecca Mikala-Shikova went for 19. J.C. Sheldon with 18. Taylor Theory with 12, and Cody McMahon, who's one of their best forwards, she only had to put 6 points up in order to dominate the Spartans. So not sure how Nebraska's going to pick this one up, but if they can, they move on to the weekend with yet another road game at Purdue. And I said just a few minutes ago when we were looking around the conference, Purdue is a team that's going to be playing a lot better than the last time Nebraska faced them, if nothing else than just being at home in front of their home audience. and having a chance to beat a team that just beat Iowa. And that's going to come with a lot of cachet and a lot of significance when Nebraska steps into their arena. So not a very easy schedule coming up for men's and women's basketball for Nebraska, but it should be very fun to watch. But that's going to do it this week for Huskers Hoops Live. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again next Tuesday morning, 8 to 9 Central, the rest of the season. And hopefully we'll be talking about another exciting upset victory from the women's basketball team and maybe an even increased resume for this Huskers men's basketball team as well. But with that being said, go Big Red.